Welcome to the podcast, The Unselfish Purpose of Life. Over 15 years ago, I started at a radio station with a monthly show on the purpose and value of unfolding the full potential of life. The discussion centered around the most basic value of life, consciousness, and the many angles and disciplines to understand its value in active, daily, responsible life. Consciousness is the basis for our perception of the world. It comprises levels of wakefulness and awareness. And yes, that is a brief version of the definition. And in future podcasts, we're going to go more deeply into this important word and understand it more fully. Every podcast, however, will have some points to make about the importance of unfolding more of our potential, more of our inner awareness, consciousness, since it is the main point of the podcast. And the podcast also emphasizes that there are two modes of life. There's rest and activity, or we could go to another level of that and say inner and outer. One supports the other. The outer we know really well. We can Google anything and get pages of information. It's the inner that we want to know better. Many of the shows I did on the radio station were translated into podcasts, and they're on the station's website. But since podcasts are more popular today, I decided to do a little editing and updating and make a different placement for greater exposure. That radio station, by the way, is not public or commercial, but listener supported. So they can play, and they actually play some of the most interesting music, and they have some inspiring talk shows. So I had one. If you want to find it streaming online, it's WPKN.org. So that's WPKN.org. And some of the podcasts are interviews with people, usually phone interviews with people who are experts in their field. And today is one of those podcasts that I'm happy to share with you. So my name is Kathy Connor, and I have been exploring the field of human potential for more than 50 years. I am a certified teacher of the Transcendental Meditation Program, and I teach this specific and very special technique in the public. In this podcast, entitled Yoga, The Royal Path to Enlightenment, I speak with an expert on yoga and author of a book of the same title, and his name is Dr. William Sands. This interview is about 10 years old, and since then, Dr. Sands, who I call Bill, has written a few more books. There's a volume 2 to the first book on yoga, and there are 2 more books expounding deeper knowledge of the tradition where yoga comes from, the Vedic tradition, the knowledge of natural law, the orderly creative intelligence upholding creation and evolution. I wanted to post both the podcasts on Maharishi Ayurveda and yoga on the same day because they actually work very well together to create a balanced level of life. They're like very close siblings who support each other toward the goal of balance in life. So please enjoy this brilliant discourse on the profound Vedic science of yoga with my friend, Dr. Bill Sands. Enjoy. So today, the topic is one that is quite familiar to us, but hasn't always been understood in great depth or detail, and that's yoga. We go to the gym. I go to the gym, and I see people with their yoga mats all the time. And I'm driving around town. There are lots of yoga studios. And lately, I've been seeing a lot of articles on social media about specific yoga moves that are good for your core, good for your arms, or good for stress. So there are a lot of there's a lot of information out there on one level, but there's a lot that's missing also. People practice yoga for health and fitness benefits, and some practice it for more substantial things like inner development. But yoga is so much more. So I wanted today to introduce you to an expert on the deeper values and deeper understanding of yoga. So our guest today is Dr. William Sands, who is the Dean of the College of Maharishi Vedic Science at Maharishi University of Management in Fairfield, Iowa. And for those of you who have listened to the show with some regularity, you'll know that I often speak with some of the professors from this great university. Dr. Sands is also Associate Professor of Sanskrit and Maharishi Vedic Science. He completed his undergraduate studies at Georgetown University and received his MA and PhD from Maharishi University of Management. His doctoral dissertation was on the Valmiki Ramayana and Maharishi's Absolute Theory of Government, for which he received the Vyasa Award for the outstanding dissertation of his graduating class. He's worked in various capacities for the Transcendental Meditation Organization worldwide for more than 40 years, including spending 12 years directly working with Maharishi at his international headquarters in Holland. So welcome, Bill. It's nice to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Kathy. It's really a delight to be here.
Well, I've been wanting to talk to you for some time because I've read your book, and I'll get to that in a moment. I wanted to let everyone know that you're an author as well as a professor, and the book is called Maharishi's Yoga, The Royal Path to Enlightenment, and we'll be talking a lot about your book. I found that your book has such a depth of understanding and knowledge that most people, practitioners of yoga or not, really don't have. And for example, most people just know yoga as the asanas, the stretches, the physical practice, but there's so much to it. I'd like to start our conversation, if you're okay with it, with two quotes from your book. In the very beginning on page 2, so that's at the very start of the book, you say, "Yoga is much more than a popular exercise regime. Quietly waiting behind the generic term yoga is a comprehensive philosophy and an array of techniques and procedures for unlocking the untapped potential that is said to be inside us all. And yoga is prepared to give us the keys to unfold this hidden potential." So that's a very significant thing. We're going to expand on that. And at the very end of your book, in the summary and conclusion, you say, "Yoga practice is ancient, but over centuries, the purity of its tradition has become obscured and misunderstood. When the effortless technique for experiencing yoga became unavailable, sincere teachers mistook the goal for the path." So perhaps, Bill, we could start with your explanation of yoga in general, and then we can get into a few more details.
Great. Okay. Yoga is a word that has a number of different meanings, and it's important to sort them out. In one of the quotes that Kathy just read, or that you just read, Kathy, you talk about the techniques of yoga having been lost or misunderstood, and that occurs because of the confusion between which sense of the term is understood in the ancient literature. One aspect of yoga is, of course, what everybody's familiar with, what's taught in the studios, what people go to the gym to practice and so forth. And that's what's called asanas, which are the stretching and postures that are part of yoga, the breathing exercises that are called pranayama. Meditation techniques are also part of what's called the path of yoga. But there's another understanding of the word that refers to a state of experience, and it's the experience of the inner self. Deep within all of us, according to the Vedic philosophy and according to yoga philosophy, deep within all of us is a vast, infinite reservoir of energy, intelligence, creativity, what we refer to as our full potential. And the experience of that is said to be the experience of the state of yoga. In other words, when one goes deep within, and in this book we recommend the Transcendental Meditation Program. That's the only mental meditation technique that I'm aware of that allows one to actually go deep within and experience this reservoir of energy and intelligence. When one has that experience, that's said to be the state of yoga. Yoga literally means union, and it's the union of our individual awareness with our unbounded potential. It's not a union in the sense that there are two entities there. It's merely the experience of what we are deep inside. And the value of that, of course, is that it allows us not just to have an experience, but to bring it out into activity, to bring it out so that we can enjoy the different qualities and characteristics of it in our life. So that's the part of yoga philosophy that's usually neglected. Every once in a while you see some mention of it, but most of the time when you see people talk about yoga and comment on yoga, it's in terms of just the physical postures and exercises, and this whole experience of the inner self is neglected, and that's caused a lot of confusion in the area of yoga.
Well, I think it's really important to start to speak more about what yoga is, because just listening to you explain just this one part, I'm thinking that yoga is like an amazing banquet, and most people are only still at the salad bar picking through the croutons, not really knowing how much else there is, and to understand the foundation, where it comes from, and its source in the Vedic tradition particularly, and all the aspects of it. It makes it so full, and it also reminds me of how our society functions for the most part. We're very much on the outer, and a lot of what my show is about is explaining that there are two aspects of life, inner and outer, and yoga has taken more of an outer realm when we're all into the yoga clothes and the yoga stuff, but not really understanding the inner value of yoga, that in order to experience yoga, you have to go within.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's exactly right. It's as though we're looking at the ocean and assuming that the waves are the only aspect of the ocean, when in fact it has its whole silent depths. And that's the reality of our lives as individuals and as society. We think thoughts, we go to work every day, or we go to school, we do different things, we're active in the world, but for the most part, we're not cognizant of the fact that there's this deep, unbounded, infinite intelligence, blissful, fulfilling intelligence that lies deep within, which is our own self. It's not something separate from us. It's our own self. And the real key to a happy, successful life is to bring that value out into activity, so that all of the beautiful qualities that can be found within can be experienced while we're going to school, while we're at work, while we're interacting with our friends, and so forth. It leads to a much more enjoyable, much more successful life.
And so this is now really what yoga is that inner value coming into the outer, and really balance, because I always understood yoga was about balance.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, it says in one of the most famous and most authoritative texts of yoga philosophy, says yoga is a state of balance, very simply that. And it's the balanced state of bringing the inner out into the outer world and enjoying life from that basis.
Yeah, I think this is the point that often gets missed, and probably not by the more serious practitioners of yoga, but by those who are just more interested in the physical health benefits, which are many, and I'm not disparaging that, but I'm just saying that it's a partial value of yoga. And yoga actually is, as you've said in the book very clearly, it's a practice, but it's an experience. It's both things. And if we just get stuck on the practice, especially if we don't understand all the ramifications of the practice, then the experience will be partial or lacking in some way. And the whole point, my understanding from your book, is that the whole point of yoga is to enjoy that full value of life because you've connected to it and brought it outward.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's exactly right. Yoga, in fact, traditionally, even the yoga postures and exercises are meant to be, when properly performed, they're meant to be a preparation for the inner experience. They loosen the body, they soften the body. The pranayama techniques, which are the breathing exercises, they calm the mind and body down, so that it's more easy to dive deep within and experience the state of yoga. So it's important in our minds, when we think of yoga, to think of the state of yoga and the path of yoga. Path means just what you do to get somewhere, and it's what you do to get to the state of yoga. Yoga, the state of yoga is an experience. The path of yoga is the postures and breathing exercises and meditation and transcendental meditation, which allow one to more easily experience the inner self.
So that sounds like something very different than what most people expect. When they go to the yoga studio, it tends to be focused on the physical. And from what I understand, that there is some meditation at the end, but not much, and it's just sort of not necessarily a specific kind or something that will allow for the mind to experience its depth more from a restful point of view. So it sounds almost like the cart got before the horse in this case.
It's exactly that. And there's a whole other element which maybe you want to get to a little bit later, but that is that a lot of the meditation techniques that are used in yoga studios have actually evolved from a different understanding of the source material, the source texts, where the path of yoga and the state of yoga were confused, and very profound descriptions of the inner state of life have been confused as being a how-to manual, in a sense. These descriptions have been taken to be something that one should do. In other words, if it says that the inner state is silent, it's peaceful, it's fulfilling, it's happy, it's without mental activity, then many of the meditation techniques have tried to teach one to forcibly control the mind such that it will become more peaceful, more quiet, and such that it will become thought-free. And that actually doesn't work. It doesn't allow you to have the inner experience.
Yeah, it's so interesting because this happens all the time in the world. People come to my office, and I've introduced myself as the director for the Fairfield County, Connecticut Transcendental Meditation Program. So what I do is I tell people about how to access this finer field of the mind on a regular basis so that it becomes part of the outer world. And even last night at my talk, a gentleman was saying to me that he didn't see how he could do this because he couldn't stop his mind. And I said, well, you don't have to do that. I'm not asking you to do that.
Yes. And that whole notion of having to stop his mind, that comes from a very prevalent misunderstanding about yoga, about yoga meditation, which confuses the state with the path.
And we're still experiencing that, and this has been going on for some time. But the good news is that there are many people now who have access on a regular basis to these fine fields and are noticing incredible changes in their life. And so to me, that was the message from your book, because it's not that you do yoga just to feel good for a few minutes. You're doing yoga, whether transcending, meditating, and all the other elements of it, so that you can have an integrated, successful life.
Yeah, that's the point. It's not for the sake of the experience. It's for the sake of one's life.
I wanted to share a story with you. This happened quite some years ago. A lady that I had met at a talk, she was telling me about her experience of transcending. That's something people can experience outside of a meditation even. And she was saying that it was at the end of a yoga class, and it was in the rest pose, the Savasana pose at the end of her yoga class. And she felt very serene, even blissful. She felt connected to everything. She said it was the most amazing experience that I ever had. So I said to her, well, how long did that last? And she said, maybe 5, 10, 15 seconds. So I said, well, that's a shame, because that's an experience you can have all the time. It opened your awareness that experience exists, but now what? So it's not a good story to tell. We don't want to walk around with just a story here or there, or one day I felt great. We want to have an experience of life that we're feeling that kind of centered, blissful, peaceful experience while we're in traffic, while we're dealing with the kids.
No, that's right. There's instances throughout Western literature, through the literature of every culture, really, of individuals who have had spontaneous experiences of the inner self. And usually what's been found is that the people became very frustrated because they didn't know how to get it back. They didn't know how to have the experience again. And it was of such a magnificent serenity and peacefulness and joy and fulfillment that they ached to have the experience again, but they didn't know how to do it. And so, the whole understanding of the inner self and that aspect of yoga philosophy has become more of a philosophy than a reality. Mm-hmm. And that's the great contribution Maharishi Mahesh Yogi made in bringing out his transcendental meditation technique, is in offering to the world something where everybody can have that experience frequently and can make it the reality of their lives.
Well, that sounds very encouraging. Bill, if you don't mind, I also found it very interesting in your book when you were explaining about the Bhagavad Gita. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and that how it's related to yoga philosophy?
Sure. The Bhagavad Gita is considered one of the main sources, along with the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. It's one of the main ancient Sanskrit texts dealing with yoga philosophy in general. And unfortunately, over the past few hundred, maybe few thousand years, its interpretation has been skewed, I guess is the best way to put it. And if you look at most translations and most commentaries on it, they speak of what appears to be a philosophy of how to live. And it's not especially pleasant. It has to do mostly with controlling yourself, trying to force yourself to act in a certain way, to adopt certain attitudes and philosophies that are said to bring you to yoga, to bring you to the experience of yoga. But in fact, the reality of life is that you can't experience the inner self by adopting a philosophy or an attitude or a mood of any kind. There are what we find are many beautiful descriptions of the inner self and of that inner self growing in life and of what Maharishi referred to often as the most mature state of yoga, which is when one lives fully that inner value along with the activity of outer life. And there are beautiful descriptions of it that have been taken to be, philosophies and attitudes and moods and so forth that people should adopt. And one of Maharishi's contributions in his own commentary is that is not at all the message of the Bhagavad Gita. The message of the Bhagavad Gita is given very early on in the second chapter. And the story itself, it's a selection from a large epic, the longest and greatest epic in world literature, called the Mahabharata. And the Mahabharata is a story of the ruling families of ancient India fighting within themselves or among themselves. And in the story, there are two aspects of the same family, two parts or branches of a family that were vying for the rulership of the land. And throughout the whole story, it's a wonderful story to read, even in its abridged versions, because it just tells quite a lot about human nature and human life and human philosophy. But the culmination of the story takes place when the two branches of the family are on the battlefield. They're ready to commence what later became an 18-day, just horrible war. And at the outset of the battle, before it commenced, the hero of the Mahabharata, his name was Arjuna, asked his charioteer to bring him into the field of battle, and so that he could observe both armies and decide what his prospects were, whether he had a chance of winning the battle and so forth. He was considered the greatest archer of his time, the greatest warrior. He was also well known for being kind and compassionate and good, just a model human being in every way. And when he got between the battlefield, he looked over to the opposing side, and he saw his family members, and he saw many of his teachers, and people that he had grown up with and who he had loved and revered. And he became confused because he knew that he was on the right side of the battle, that he was on the side of righteousness, and yet he felt very reluctant to go into battle and kill those he loved. And at one point, he threw down his bow, sat down in his chariot, and said, "I will not fight." And his charioteer was Lord Krishna, who is known throughout the Vedic literature as a great enlightened soul whose words and advice and philosophies represented natural law. Really, it represented the right philosophy of life, the side of integration of life, the side of the growth and development of human consciousness. And Lord Krishna gave him a very interesting instruction. Arjuna asked him, "Should I fight? How can I fight? My duty is to protect the kingdom. I'm a warrior, that's my duty. But on the other hand, my duty is to protect my family members. And in this case, there's a conflict." And he sat down, he refused to fight. And Lord Krishna said to him very simply, he said a phrase that will sound very obscure, but it's very simple to understand. In the Sanskrit is Nistray Gunyo Bhava, means be without the three gunas. The three gunas are said to be the most fundamental principles of nature's functioning. They're the three fundamental laws. And so by saying, go beyond the three gunas, he was telling Arjuna that in order to resolve the conflicts of life, the first thing you must do is transcend. You must experience the inner reality of life. That's the only area of life that's truly beyond the physical universe. Take your awareness there. Now, unfortunately, this verse has been commented upon frequently over the last few thousand years, and most recent commentators, most modern commentators, have thought that it meant that he should adopt a mood or an attitude of not being attached. Taking oneself beyond the material world to them meant take your attitude beyond the material world. And so the feeling was, go into battle, fight, but don't care much about the outcome, don't care about life in general, don't care about whether you're happy or you're sad or whether you're successful or you're a failure or so forth. And this is not the correct intent at all. The intent was transcend, go beyond, experience yoga, essentially, experience that state of yoga within yourself. And then 2 verses later, this whole passage is in verse form. It's like a poem. And 2 verses later, Lord Krishna said to Arjuna, Yogastha kuru karmani. And that means established in yoga, perform action. That verse has also been badly misunderstood. What it's thought to be is establish yourself in the practice of yoga. Whatever the practice of yoga is taken to be, and many commentators have thought it was doing good works and thinking good things about people and trying to help humanity, and very good things in their own right, but they're not something that actually allows one to go inside and experience yoga. Yogastha, meaning established in yoga, means having taken your awareness inside, having experienced yoga within, and having brought it out into activity, as one does very spontaneously, very automatically, through regular practice of meditation, transcendental meditation, then one has the capacity to function more effectively, more spontaneously in accord with nature's design, which means in a positive evolutionary context. And this is the primary message of the Bhagavad Gita. Transcend, and then on that basis act. And that in that you'll find that life is fulfilling, more successful, more prosperous, more whatever it is you set your mind on. And that is the message that Maharishi brought out in his commentary in the Bhagavad Gita. It's quite different from the usual commentary, which goes through the text of the Bhagavad Gita and talks about how you must control your thoughts, how you must control your attitude, you must have a good disposition to everybody, you must not have possessions and all these things. And all of that comes from descriptions of the enlightened state, not from, it's not a manual that tells you how to live your life. And I think the validity of Maharishi's interpretation is that that's what people find when they practice his meditation, when they transcend, when they experience yoga, then when they go out to activity, then they are more successful, more happy, more prosperous. Whereas doing good works, thinking good thoughts, helping people out is very noble, and in no way is it my intention or was it Maharishi's intention to criticize that. It's just to point out that that's very well and good, and it's a good thing to do, but it doesn't take you to the inner reality of life. It doesn't take you to the that inner self, which can be unfolded and brought to bear on all of the problems of life. So that's the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. There's much more, of course, and we can talk more about it, but in terms of just the general overall sense of what the Bhagavad Gita is, that's its message. Transcend, experience the inner self, experience the state of yoga, and then go out into the world, and you'll find that in that lies the greatest solution to all the problems of life that one confronts.
I think it sounds so simple, really, when you explain it like you just did. but we come from a place in society where we have been trained to think outward. So there's a long standing habit of the brain to go outward to find solutions, which I would think is why these misinterpretations came up and continued for so long, because we may have lost awareness of how to go within, especially. You could, if you only know that the tree is sitting level with the ground, you forgot about the roots, and centuries can go by, and then somebody discovers, oh, there's something under here. And then you realize that, oh, I guess that's why it's standing. Or the other analogy I was thinking as you were talking is, if there are cracks in the house and you go patch them and paint them and decorate, and the house could look quite nice. But if you don't look at the foundation, which is the source of why the house is cracking, then it's going to crack again. So the suggestions that have been coming down all these years about creating this mood of non-attachment, or creating a mood of being kind when you don't feel like that all the time, is really tricking the system. It's patching the cracks, but not fixing the foundation. So if we really want to live yoga, which is that centered and balanced and what I call inner peace, you have to locate it. You can't talk about it. You can't hope for it. You have to locate it. And I think that for so long has been missing, because to try to have inner peace is a strain, and that's stress, and that's going to block it. So you're the hamster on the wheel. So we have to let people know there are ways to go inward. They've just been lost or misunderstood, and now revived, so that people can enjoy that.
Well, that's the thing. The technique because it requires a technique. Our senses naturally go outwards. We see everything around us. We hear everything around us. We don't naturally tend to think in terms of going within, and it requires a technique, a very simple technique, but it requires a technique where you sit, you close the eyes, you practice a simple technique, and then the awareness goes inwards of its own accord. But it does require the proper technique, and unfortunately, the meditations that are available in the marketplace tend to be based on this misunderstanding about what yoga is. They tend to be based on the description of yoga. A classic example is there are many beautiful expressions throughout the Sanskrit literature that describe the state as peaceful, quiet, as still. The mind is still. And so many meditation techniques try to teach you to still your mind, to force your mind to be still, maybe by staring at a candle, maybe by holding some thought in the mind and not letting it go against all the other tendencies of the mind. And all of these techniques, they create activity because they're uncomfortable. And generally you'll find that people don't do them for very long. They'll do them here and there a couple of times. Maybe they'll do them for some period of time. But they don't persist in doing them. And they don't persist because they're not charming. They're not helpful. They're not actually accomplishing what they're supposed to accomplish. And that's what Maharishi's Transcendental Meditation does, is it allows the awareness, by virtue of its own natural tendency to go deep within, to experience this state of yoga completely effortlessly, completely automatically. And it has to be effortless and automatic because it's a more and more silent state. Mm-hmm. The experience of yoga is a state of complete silence, complete peace. You can't get to that complete peace by making the mind more active, by concentrating, by contemplating, by thinking about things, by trying to hold some idea or staring at a candle. That makes the mind more active. Mm-hmm. You can't go to more silent levels of the mind by becoming more active, by trying to force the mind. And the whole understanding of meditation and yoga is completely overshadowed by all the understandings of effort and control, and unfortunately it's not a right understanding.
And it's what we've known, because how we accomplish in the world is through effort and action, which is okay, but we're going in a different direction. And that's what I'll often tell people. I say, you can't take the same rules with you when you're going in a different direction. So when the mind is settling down and becoming more quiet, more silent, it's less concrete. It's different than what we're used to. So you can't even enter into this with the hope of having this experience or the expectation of having an experience, because it's really just engaging natural law. And it is a practice and a technology that you do over time to unfold. It's not going to be that you get the key, open the treasure, and you're a billionaire. You have to do it over time. And because the nervous system will adapt and become more stable to express it and have it. And that's really the point of yoga. The yoga is that balanced state that you achieve as you open your awareness to these fine fields and bring it out.
Yeah. No, exactly. And then the efforts that we're used to in activity become less. What people find when they practice transcendental meditation is that they find they can accomplish more with much less effort, that things tend to go better, that their thinking becomes more clear, they make better decisions, everything becomes more conducive to effective action without undue strain. So it's very much in the direction of greater balance. Mm-hmm. The whole technique, it's been available at different times throughout the history of mankind. There's in his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, Maharishi goes through many of the great, what are thought to be philosophers of life, and how what they taught was this technique of integration of life, this technique of going deep within. But it's just the nature of life that these things come and go. Language changes, cultures change. People tend to forget what they need to do in order to maintain a high level of living, and it gets lost. And now it's available again, and so it's available for better life for everyone.
Something else I wanted to ask you about, because I find that this is an area that most people don't know very much about at all. Particularly, I would call them the casual yoga practitioner. You have a whole chapter in your book on Ashtanga yoga, and
yes.
you talk about the 8 limbs, and it's really quite fascinating to understand that. And along the same lines that we're speaking now, it's a holistic understanding rather than an isolated understanding, which tends to be what most people think of when they look at these 8 limbs. So can you explain to us a little bit about that?
Yes. It's a part of yoga called Ashtanga yoga. And as it's understood in the world today, it's a very vigorous set of asanas, of postures, of exercises that are usually coordinated with breathing exercises, with different pranayamas. And it differs, like all of the systems of yoga. It's very hard to even define what yoga is in the world because there's so many different systems and interpretations and variations. But Ashtanga yoga generally is like that. It's a very rigorous set of postures and exercises and breathing exercises. And it's predicated on a section of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And these Ashtanga means 8 and Anga means limb. And they're called the 8 limbs of yoga. And when you read through them, it seems very natural, this understanding that there are 8 steps that take you to the inner state of yoga. This is one of those areas where, at least on a philosophical level, practitioners understand that there is an inner reality, even if what they do doesn't necessarily help them get there. But they do have that understanding. But what Maharishi has said in his commentary on Ashtanga yoga is that they are not 8 steps of yoga, because the word anga means limb. And what is a limb? A limb is an extension of the body. We have 2 arms, we have 2 legs. These are the limbs of our body. And when do they grow? They grow when the body grows. Now, Ashtanga yoga means the 8 limbs of yoga, not the 8 steps. And these 8 limbs grow spontaneously when the body itself grows. They're not steps that should be done in sequence or out of sequence or in any way as a means of getting to yoga, but rather they're the symptoms or they're the characteristics of the state of yoga. And what that means is very interesting, because what Maharishi is saying is that these 8 limbs are not something that you do. They're not intended to be what you do, even though the words themselves have that meaning in different contexts. But rather they describe characteristics of the inner state of yoga, and they describe characteristics of higher states of consciousness, which, as I said earlier, Maharishi considers to be the more mature states of yoga. The state of enlightenment, in which one lives the inner self along with activity, is considered the most mature state of yoga. And these 8 limbs are characteristics or qualities of that level of consciousness, and they're qualities of the consciousness that's found within the inner self. Now, some of the limbs are words that we're familiar with: asana, pranayama, that kind of thing. And so you wonder, well, how can this be a characteristic? And what Maharishi explains is that every Sanskrit word has many, many levels of meaning. And this is certainly true. If you look in a Sanskrit dictionary, you'll see any word that you look up has a wide variety of different meanings. And in Maharishi's view, these different meanings represent different levels of expression. So in other words, the word asana on one level, on the more surface level, does refer, in fact, to physical postures and exercises. But on its more profound level, it means, the word literally means seat, and it's what you could say is the seat of yoga, the stability of yoga, the ability of yoga to be lived in the body and on the level of the mind. Pranayama is a breathing exercise on its more surface level, but on its most fundamental meaning is that it's a principle of action. It's a principle that maintains the different qualities and characteristics of yoga and maintains them in an integrated state of consciousness. This would be very abstract, I understand, for people who haven't had the experience of the inner self and haven't experienced growing consciousness. But it's worth just mentioning, just for the sake of understanding. Now, some of the categories, some of the subcategories, deal with words that are very familiar in different contexts. For example, there are 5 yamas. Yama is the first principle. It's the first anga, the first limb. And it has 5 categories. One of them is satya. The word satya means truth. So what this has been taken to mean over time is that one should always speak the truth. As a prerequisite for experiencing yoga, one must learn to speak the truth. The second of these subcategories, of the 5 yamas, is ahimsa, which means nonviolence. And so the feeling has been that one should adopt an attitude of nonviolence. One should not harm anybody. Both of these interpretations, they may not be the correct interpretation, but they're good things. It's good for people to speak the truth. It's good for people to not be violent and to harm themselves or the environment or anybody in the environment. But in Maharishi's commentary, what they refer to is qualities or characteristics of the state of yoga. That satya means that which doesn't change. And it's derived from a Sanskrit term sat, which means existence. It's the state of existence itself. It's the unending, unbounded, infinite, eternal, non-changing state of consciousness. And those qualities of non-changing and eternal are described by this term satya. So in this context, in the context of Ashtanga Yoga, satya is referring to a quality or characteristic of the inner self and of the self in higher states of consciousness. Ahimsa is also a characteristic because the state, the inner state, is not associated in a sense with the outer world. It's a state of unity. There's no duality, no diversity. There's no harm because there's nothing to harm it. It's beyond harm. It's a state that is beyond the ups and downs and turmoils of modern life or ancient life or any kind of life. It's a transcendental state. And so it has that quality of non-harm. But both of these qualities, even the more superficial understandings, satya as truth or ahimsa as nonviolence, the qualities as we normally understand them grow spontaneously anyway as a result of the experience of yoga. So one finds that one tends to speak truth more. One just very naturally speaks more truth. And this has been found in the behavioral research on people who practice TM. Prisoners, juvenile delinquents, people that have behavioral problems. These behavioral problems tend to go away very automatically and spontaneously, not because anybody told them they should go away, but just because this quality of satya and this quality of ahimsa tends to grow in life spontaneously as a result of the experience of yoga, the experience of the inner self. Nonviolence has actually been shown, in violent prisoners, violent offenders, violent juvenile delinquents. People tend to, when they are released from prison, when they're released from juvenile detention, and when they've learned the TM technique during their incarceration, they tended to exhibit these more positive qualities. They don't go back to prison nearly at the rate that other people go back to prison. So all of the different qualities of Ashtanga Yoga, which describe the state itself, also grow in one's life as yoga grows in one's life, all of the different qualities. So that's basically Maharishi's interpretation. And it's, as you mentioned earlier, Kathy, you said, you spoke of putting the cart before the horse, and that's exactly what this Maharishi's commentary is doing. He's saying you don't speak the truth in order to experience yoga. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help you go inwards. It's a good thing, but it doesn't help you go to the inner self. You don't practice nonviolence with the expected result of experiencing the inner state of yoga, because you have to transcend in order to experience yoga. But rather, when you experience yoga, these qualities grow spontaneously in life. And all of the different qualities of Ashtanga yoga grow spontaneously. Mm-hmm. So in Maharishi's view, the descriptions in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras are meant to be a philosophical understanding of the state of yoga. They're not intended to be a series of steps that one should take or practices or procedures that one should undertake. Mm-hmm. It's merely a description for the sake of understanding of how yoga grows in one's life. And that's that.
It's a lot simpler, really, because quite frankly, just listening to you as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, well, when someone is, let's say they're focused on telling the truth, they're telling the truth from their point of view. And if their point of view, or we could say consciousness, is limited, it's going to not necessarily be completely true. So, right. You can practice speaking the truth, which, as we say, is a great thing to do. It's wonderful. But if you don't have fullness of awareness, then you're going to have partial perception, and what you see as truth may not be the whole truth. So the whole point of yoga is everything that I talk about on my show is developing the inner quality of life, because there it is fullness. And we haven't known this for so long. We've been so busy accomplishing on the outer and really getting stuck there for the most part. But people in droves are looking for relief. They're looking for inner peace. When I start my talk on the TM technique, when people come to hear more about it, I ask them why they're here. And most people today will say, well, I'm looking for relief from stress. And in the next breath, they say, an inner peace. And so I say, those two are connected. Let's get rid of some of that stress. And that inner peace is there. That's why it's called inner peace. And we're calling it yoga at its depth. It's pure consciousness. It's being. There's some beautiful expressions to define it. But one thing that got lost for a long time is that everyone has access to that.
Yeah. It's even in the language. It's interesting. It's in the language, inner peace. Everybody talks about inner peace. Why do they talk about inner peace? It's because everyone knows intuitively that deep within is peace. Deep within is quiet. And yet there hasn't been, up until recently, a method of actually going within and finding that inner peace. But it's still in the language. It's still intuitively there in the way people talk about it.
Yes, it is. And I hear it a lot more than I did before. So I think people are realizing that, now's the time to start to bring that out. And we're getting on to closing up our discussion here. So I was wondering if there's anything else you wanted to tell us before we have to sign off.
No, I think the main thing, the main message that Maharishi brought out in his commentaries is transcend first. Experience yoga deep within. Experience the inner self. And that will go a long way towards helping one navigate through life by being more creative, more intelligent, more successful, and more happiness. The one thing I don't think we may have emphasized is that the inner self is a state of, traditionally it's understood as a state of bliss. The Sanskrit term is ananda, bliss, happiness, fulfillment. Inner fulfillment is another one of those terms that everyone speaks about. It's there. And when one begins to unfold this creativity and intelligence through the regular experience of the inner self, one is also unfolding one's own potential to be completely happy, completely fulfilled. And that doesn't mean that one would become disengaged from activity and not enjoy life. Life becomes more a joy when one is feeling fulfilled and happy and blissful, when one's successful. It doesn't get in the way of activity. It doesn't mean that one would want to be a recluse and run away to the caves or mountains, but rather that the engaging in activity becomes more enjoyable, more delightful, and more productive at the same time. So it's a wonderful way to achieve all of the things that you always dreamed you could do in life, but weren't really sure you had the ability or the potential to do. And that's to enjoy a very, very fulfilling, happy, successful, creative, dynamic life.
Well, that sounds really nice. And I deeply appreciate that you took your time to speak with us today. You've been listening to Kathy's Corner on WPKN 89.5 FM. And our guest today has been Dr. William Sands, an expert on yoga and Sanskrit, and his book, Maharishi's Yoga, The Royal Path to Enlightenment. We've been speaking about that. And Bill, how can someone get your book if they're interested?
Well, they could. It's on Amazon, and they would only have to I think, go to Amazon and enter Maharishi's Yoga, The Royal Path to Enlightenment, and my name, as it is stated on the site, is William F. Sands, S-A-N-D-S, and then you can get the site, and it's very easy to order.
Okay. Well, I hope people will look into it. It is a fascinating read because it gives such a deep understanding of this popular practice, but understanding that it's an experience first. And thank you again, Bill, for sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us today. It's been a great pleasure to speak with you.
It's been a pleasure for myself, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, you're so welcome. So have a wonderful day.
You can rely on WPKN for entertainment and information you want to hear 24 hours a day, every day. Won't you consider doing something for us that means we can count on you? Please consider becoming a sustaining supporter of this station. Set up a secure, recurring monthly donation using PayPal or a checking account through our website, WPKN.org. When you become a sustaining supporter, you help keep us the reliable alternative you've come to expect from WPKN listener-sponsored radio.
On Saturday, August 20th, the Black Rock neighborhood of Bridgeport is holding Connecticut's very first Porch Fest Music Festival. Porch Fests are the next big thing in summer festivals. Across the country, communities are launching these grassroots events where residents host performers on their front porches for a free afternoon of music. The first annual Black Rock Porch Fest is bringing 15 different performances to 15 different front porches from 1 to 7 p.m. on August 20th. The musicians are primarily local and will be playing rock, jazz, acoustic, big band, blues, and more. All you need to do to enjoy Porch Fest is to look up the schedule online, chart out your course for the day, pack up your snacks and refreshments, and head over to any or all of the porch performances. You can find the full lineup of musicians, porch locations, and all the details at blackrockcc.org/porchfest.
The 2016 Pipers Gathering will take place Friday through Sunday, August 19th through the 21st at Wisdom House in Litchfield, Connecticut. This annual event welcomes newcomers and advanced players alike, focusing on alternative bagpipes, bellows-blown pipes such as the Irish Uilleann pipes, Scottish and Northumbrian small pipes, and many, many more. The weekend includes workshops and demonstrations and concerts on Saturday and Sunday evenings. More information and registration at www.pipersgathering.org.
Do you or a loved one have a disability that impacts your mobility or your ability to work and live independently in all aspects of your life? Access Independence can help. Our advocates work with people with disabilities to overcome barriers and access services in areas such as benefits, transportation, housing, peer support, youth services, durable medical equipment, and more. For more information, visit us at www.accessinct.org or call 203-378-6977.
Founded in 2006, Connecticut Roller Girls is a flat-track roller derby league that fosters community, sportspersonship, and athleticism. Connecticut